Hi, I'm Andrea Mackenzie and I'm reading from a block north of Bloor Street in Toronto. If you hear background noise, it's probably the clangor of Bloor Street traffic outside. It is still a main thoroughfare, just as it was in Jane's day. Chapter 5 of Jane of Lantern Hill by L.M. Montgomery. Up to the age of 10, Jane had believed her father was dead. She could not recall that anybody had ever told her so, but if she had thought about it at all, she would have felt quite sure of it. She just did not think about it. Nobody ever mentioned him. All she knew about him was that his name must have been Andrew Stewart because Mother was Mrs. Andrew Stewart. For anything else, he might as well never have existed as far as Jane was concerned. She did not know much about fathers. The only one she was really acquainted with was Phyllis's father, Uncle David Coleman, a handsome, oldish man with pouches under his eyes who grunted at her occasionally when he came to Sunday dinners. Jane had an idea his grunts were meant to be friendly, and she did not dislike him. But there was nothing about him that made her envy Phyllis for having a father. With a mother so sweet and adorable and loving, what did one want of a father? Then Agnes Ripley came to St. Agatha's. Jane liked Agnes well enough at first, though Agnes had stuck her tongue out at Jane rather derisively on the occasion of their first meeting. She was the daughter of somebody who was called the great Thomas Ripley. He had built railroads and things, and most of the St. Agatha's girls paid court to her and plumed themselves if she noticed them. She was much given to secrets, and it came to be thought a great honor among the St. Agathians if Agnes told you a secret. Therefore, Jane was conscious of a decided thrill when one afternoon on the playground, Agnes came up to her and said darkly and mysteriously, "I know a secret." "I know a secret" is probably the most intriguing phrase in the world. Jane surrendered to its allure. "Oh, tell me," she implored. She wanted to be admitted to that charmed inner circle of girls who had been told one of Agnes' secrets. And she wanted to know the secret for its own sake. Secrets must always be wonderful, beautiful things. Agnes wrinkled up her fat little nose and looked important. "Oh, I'll tell you some other time." "I don't want to hear it some other time. I want to hear it now," pleaded Jane, her marigold eyes full of eager radiance. Agnes' little elfish face, framed in its straight brown hair, was alive with mischief. She winked one of her green eyes at Jane. "All right, don't blame me if you don't like it when you hear it. Listen." Jane listened. The towers of St. Agatha's listened. The shabby streets beyond listened. It seemed to Jane that the whole world listened. She was one of the chosen. Agnes was going to tell her a secret. "Your father and mother don't live together." Jane stared at Agnes. What she had said didn't make any sense. "Of course they don't live together," she said. "My father is dead." "Oh, no, he isn't," said Agnes. "He's living down in Prince Edward Island. Your mother left him when you were 3 years old." Jane felt as if some big cold hand were beginning to squeeze her heart. "That isn't true," she gasped. "'Tis too. I heard Aunt Dora telling Mother all about it. She said your mother married him just after he came back from the war, one summer when your grandmother took her down to the Maritimes. Your grandmother didn't want her to. Aunt Dora said everybody knew it wouldn't last long. He was poor. But it was you that made the most trouble. You should never have been born. Neither of them wanted you, Aunt Dora said. They fought like cat and dog after that, and at last your mother just up and left him. Aunt Dora said she would likely have divorced him, only divorces are awful hard to get in Canada, and anyhow, all the Kennedys think divorce is a dreadful thing." The hand was gripping Jane's heart so tightly now that she could hardly breathe. I don't believe it," she said. "If that's how you're going to talk when I tell you a secret, I'll never tell you another one, Miss Victoria Stewart," said Agnes, reddening with rage. "I don't want to hear any more," said Jane. She would never forget what she had heard. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. Jane thought the afternoon would never end. St. Agatha's was a nightmare. Frank had never driven so slowly home. The snow had never looked so grimy and dirty along the dingy streets. The wind had never been so gray. The moon, floating high in the sky, was all faded and paper white, but Jane didn't care if it was never polished again. An afternoon tea was in progress at 60 Gay when she arrived there. The big drawing room, decorated lavishly with pale pink snapdragons and tulips and maidenhair fern, was full of people. Mother, in orchid chiffon with loose trailing lace sleeves, was laughing and chatting. Grandmother, with blue-white diamonds sparkling in her hair, was sitting on her favorite needlepoint chair, looking, so one lady said, such an utterly sweet silver-haired thing, just like a Whistler mother. Aunt Gertrude and Aunt Sylvia were pouring tea at a table covered with Venetian lace, where tall pink tapers were burning. Straight through them all, Jane marched to Mother. She did not care how many people were there. She had one question to ask, and it must be answered at once. At once. Jane could not bear her suspense another moment. "Mummy," she said, "is my father alive?" A strange, dreadful hush suddenly fell over the room. A light like a sword flashed into Grandmother's blue eyes. Aunt Sylvia gasped and Aunt Gertrude turned an unbecoming purple. But Mother's face was as if snow had fallen over it. "Is he?" said Jane. "Yes," said Mother. She said nothing more. Jane asked nothing more. She turned and went out and up the stairs blindly. In her own room, she shut the door and lay down very softly on the big white bearskin rug by the bed, her face buried in the soft fur. Heavy black waves of pain seemed rolling over her. So it was true. All her life she had thought her father dead while he was living, on that faraway dot on the map which she had been told was the province of Prince Edward Island. But he and Mother did not like each other, and she had not been wanted. Jane found that it was a very curious and unpleasant sensation to feel that your parents hadn't wanted you. She was sure that all the rest of her life she would hear Agnes' voice saying, "You should never have been born." She hated Agnes Ripley. She would always hate her. Jane wondered if she would live to be as old as Grandmother, and how she could bear it if she did. Mother and Grandmother found her there when everybody had gone. "Victoria, get up." Jane did not move. "Victoria, I am accustomed to being obeyed when I speak." Jane got up. She had not cried. Hadn't somebody ages ago said that Jane never cried? But her face was stamped with an expression that might have wrung anybody's heart. Perhaps it touched even Grandmother, for she said, quite gently for her, "I have always told your mother, Victoria, that she ought to tell you the truth. I told her you were sure to hear it from someone sooner or later. Your father is living. Your mother married him against my wish and lived to repent it. I forgave her and welcomed her back gladly when she came to her senses. That is all. And in future, when you feel an irresistible urge to make a scene while we are entertaining, will you be good enough to control the impulse until our guests are gone?" "Why didn't he like me?" asked Jane, dully. When all was said and done, that seemed to be what was hurting most. Her mother might not have wanted her either to begin with, but Jane knew that Mother loved her now. Mother suddenly gave a little laugh, so sad that it nearly broke Jane's heart. "He was jealous of you, I think," she said. "He made your mother's life wretched," said Grandmother, her voice hardening. "Oh, I was to blame too," cried Mother chokingly. Jane, looking from one to the other, saw the swift change that came over Grandmother's face. "You will never mention your father's name in my hearing or in your mother's hearing again," said Grandmother. "As far as we are concerned, as far as you are concerned, he is dead." The prohibition was unnecessary. Jane didn't want to mention her father's name again. He had made Mother unhappy, and so Jane hated him and put him out of her thoughts completely. There were just some things that didn't bear thinking of, and Father was one of them. But the most terrible thing about it all was that there was something now that could not be talked over with Mother. Jane felt it between them, indefinable, but there. The old perfect confidence was gone. There was a subject that must never be mentioned, and it poisoned everything. She could never bear Agnes Ripley and her cult of secrets again, and was glad when Agnes left the school, the great Thomas having decided that it was not quite up to date enough for his daughter. Agnes wanted to learn tap dancing. That ends Chapter 5. Thanks for listening, and see you again.